Tragedy, controversy, and a championship fight for the ages, 1994 was an unforgettable season in F1. 2 stars lost their lives, sporting scandals emerged, and the championship fight was decided by one of the most controversial moments in F1 history. My name is Scar, and this is the story of the 1994 Formula 1 season. So, let's dive in. But before we go into a race-by-race breakdown, I wanted to provide some background information on the regulation changes that happened ahead of the season and what the cars were like at the time. For the 1994 season, F1 introduced major technical rule changes aimed at reducing costs and shifting focus back to driver skill. Key changes included a ban on electronic driver aids such as active suspension, traction control, and launch control, as well as the removal of four-wheel steering. Additionally, refueling during races was reintroduced for the first time since 1983, and teams were required to use gearboxes with between 4 and 7 gear ratios. The 1994 cars were visually similar to their 1993 counterparts, but featured exposed cockpits and low ground clearance, emphasising driver skill but compromising safety. This exposed the driver's neck, shoulders, and hands, design elements unthinkable in today's F1 safety standards. During pre-season testing, Benetton's JJ Leto crashed in Barcelona, suffering a fractured neck vertebrae. His accident marked the start of a series of serious crashes throughout the season. As we head into the race-by-race breakdown, I just wanted to state that not every single incident is going to be covered in this video, because otherwise it would genuinely be hours long. So much happened, and I highly recommend going out there and looking the season up and looking at race-by-race breakdowns, because so much happened. It is truly fascinating and it is so messy. But this video is largely going to be focusing on any incidences of controversy and anything that impacted the championship title fight. So if you're wondering why certain things aren't going to be brought up and certain drivers aren't going to be mentioned, that is why. So with that out of the way, let's begin in Brazil. The season started off in Brazil and all the home fans were supporting Senna. It was no surprise that he took pole, and after lap 1 he was leading the race. However, disputes began at the first race of the season. On lap 21, race leader Ayrton Senna entered the pits in his Williams. He was closely followed by Michael Schumacher in his Benetton. Schumacher completed his pit stop quicker, and the German came out ahead of the Brazilian. Senna had managed to reduce the gap to Schumacher to 5 seconds, but on lap 56 he spun out after pushing too hard. He was out and Schumacher went on to win the race. This sparked speculation that Benetton were using a quicker pit stop system. Round 2 was at the new Tanaka International Circuit in Japan, and Senna took pole. At the start of the race, Schumacher managed to get past Senna and Häkkinen managed to get past Hill. Häkkinen went on to attack Senna and ran into the back of him, causing Senna to spin out, who was then hit by Larini, taking them both out. Hill, who could see Schumacher pull away, attacked Häkkinen on lap 4, but messed up, spun and dropped back to 9th. While Schumacher pulled away, Hill closed in on Berger, but was forced to retire on lap 50 after his transmission failed. Schumacher went on to make it 2 wins from 2. The FIA outlawed launch control for the 1994 season, but suspicions emerged after the Pacific Grand Prix that some teams were using the illegal driver aids. Senna raised concerns over the Benetton, and at the San Marino Grand Prix the FIA requested that teams who finished in 1st, 2nd and 3rd had to provide copies of their engine management system source code. The weekend got off to a bad start as Barrichello had a major crash during practice and was knocked unconscious. His car was launched into the air by the curb, and less than a yard from the curb was a tyre wall which almost instantly stopped the car's forward motion. His car was flipped over and landed upside down. He swallowed his tongue and his life was only saved by the quick action by the medical team. He returned to the circuit on Saturday afternoon with a broken nose, bandaged arm and cut lip. Barrichello has never been able to recall anything regarding the incident. In qualifying, a front wing flap fell off Roland Ratzenberger's car, causing major suspension damage and worsened aerodynamics. On his next lap, the front wing broke off entirely and became lodged underneath the car, causing him to lose control and crash into the wall at the Villeneuve kink at over 180 miles per hour. His car was severely damaged and he suffered a basal skull fracture caused by the impact, and was pronounced dead at the hospital shortly afterwards. Speaking to motorsport.com, Damon Hill recalls driving his Williams past the wreckage. Quote, "I went past the wreckage of Roland's car and my heart sank because it looked pretty bad immediately. Guys were standing around the car and waving us past, but there was no attempt to get him out of the car, and he looked limp." Upon seeing the car, Johnny Herbert also recalls his emotions. Quote, "I saw the red flags. I saw it was a Simtech, but I didn't know which one. As I got to him, I slowed up and looked, and thinking, shit." Teammate David Brabham said he knew instantly upon driving past the car that the Austrian had passed away. Quote, "As I've gone round a corner, seen him and seen the car, it's a very vivid moment in my memory, and one that I can still see clear as day. For me, I was looking at someone who wasn't there anymore. I went back to the pits and of course everybody's in a state of panic. I drove past the car so they were all asking me, what do you think? I remember my wife Lisa asking me what I thought, and I said, I think he's gone. There was something about it." Emotionally, Ratzenberger's death deeply affected Senna. He reportedly collapsed on the floor of his motorhome in tears, having visited the crash site with F1 doctor and friend Professor Sid Watkins. Watkins revealed in his book Life After the Limit that he suggested to Senna that he withdraw from F1 entirely. Quote, "Ayrton, why don't you withdraw from racing tomorrow? In fact, why don't you give it up altogether? What else do you need to do? You have been world champion 3 times, you are obviously the quickest driver. Give it up and let's go fishing." Senna responded, quote, "Sid, there are certain things over which we have no control. I cannot quit, I have to go in." Despite reported concerns from Williams and Watkins over Senna's mindset, he would race. He remarked the next morning in his motorhome that he was being forced to race. As photographer John Nicholson explained, quote, "Then on Sunday morning we were in the debrief room and I took some pictures of Damon and Ayrton was saying, 'I don't want to race, they're making me race.' And it's like, what can I do? I'm just a photographer, you know. You need to have a word with Bernie, I just can't do anything." As he and the rest of the drivers prepared to take the grid for the race, they were resolute in their resolve. Ratzenberger's death must lead to change in safety for F1. After qualifying recommenced, Senna took pole. During the race morning's driver meeting, the drivers were all talking about the crash and were determined to improve safety, resulting in the inauguration of the Grand Prix Drivers Association. Senna offered to take the role as leader as he was the most senior driver. At the start of the race, Leto's benneton stalled and was hit by Pedro Lami's Lotus. Debris from the crash, including Lami's front right tyre, flew into the grandstand and injured 4 spectators and a policeman. Lamy was uninjured, but Leto suffered a slight arm injury. The safety car was called out with Senna leading Schumacher. The race restarted at the end of lap 5 and Senna immediately tried to pull away from Schumacher. At the end of the 7th lap, Senna lost control for reasons that are still subject to controversy today, and went straight into an unprotected concrete wall. He left the track at around 190 miles per hour, and by braking was able to slow it to around 135 miles per hour in slightly under 2 seconds before hitting the wall. The suspension of the Williams broke on impact and the front right tyre of the car flew backwards and hit Senna on the head. The car slid to a halt, with Senna motionless. From the helicopter pictures, a slight movement of Senna's head gave a hint of hope. Dr. Sid Watkins was on the scene in under 2 minutes, and Senna was airlifted to the hospital, but nothing more could be done and he was pronounced dead later that evening. After the race, a moving detail was revealed when an Austrian flag was found in the Brazilian's cockpit. It was thought that Senna was going to pay tribute to Ratzenberger after the race. Speaking for the Senna film, Watkins revealed that he knew instantly that Senna's injuries were fatal and he believed he saw his friend die on the tarmac. Quote, "We got him out of the cockpit and got his helmet off and got an airway into him, and I saw from his neurological signs that it was going to be a fatal head injury. And then he sighed and his body relaxed, and that was the moment, I'm not religious, that I thought his spirit had departed." When the race restarted, Berger took the lead on the track, but Schumacher was still leading in the aggregate standings. On the 12th lap in total, Schumacher did take the lead but pitted immediately afterwards. Another incident followed when Alboreto lost his right rear wheel when exiting the pits. He had already increased to a significant speed, and thus the wheel caused severe injuries to a member of the Ferrari pit crew. This incident would lead to 2 major rule changes in F1. A pit lane speed of 120 km per hour during the race and 80 km per hour during practice and qualifying. Pit crews would now have to remain inside their garage until needed. Both rules would already be imposed at the next race in Monaco. Schumacher went on to win the race, but there were no celebrations on the podium, with all the talk centred on Senna and Ratzenberger. In the post-race press conference, Schumacher summarised the thoughts of the F1 paddock. Quote, "What happened this weekend, I have never seen something like this. Not just one thing, so many things. The only thing I can say is that I hope we learn from this. I think there is a lot to learn from, and we have to use this, and things like this, they shouldn't happen without taking the experience from it." FIA President Max Mosley announced that sweeping car changes would be made immediately. The size of the diffuser was reduced, the front wing end plates were raised, and restrictions were placed on their size. This reduced downforce by a substantial 15%. The car's weight was increased by 25 kilos so the cockpit safety changes could be made. Particular emphasis was given to strengthening the wishbones to prevent tyres and other car parts from detaching and hitting the driver. The airboxes were removed from the engines and the teams were required to install air vents to reduce the effect. The wooden plank on the car's underside debuted later in the year. This required the cars to be raised, preventing them from bottoming out. A wear tolerance of 10% was permitted, but this was equated to 1mm. The drivers also acted, officially forming the GDPA ahead of the next race in Spain. Niki Lauda joined as director and worked with Michael Schumacher to ensure driver safety demands were met at the tracks. Senna's legacy and influence on motorsport cannot be understated. Every safety feature on a Grand Prix car up until 2014 can be attributed back to his and Ratzenberger's death at Imola. Senna died a 3-time world champion, all achieved with McLaren, and was chasing a 4th with Williams. His achievements on and off the track mark him as one of the greatest F1 drivers in history. Ratzenberger's career was cut short, but he did achieve his dream of driving in F1. The morning F1 field moved to Monaco and Schumacher took his first ever pole. At the start of the race, the first 2 grid spots were painted with a Brazilian and Austrian flag out of respect for Senna and Ratzenberger. At the start of the race, Hill got by Berger and attacked Hakkinen into the first corner. There was contact and both cars spun out into the escape road and were out of the race. Schumacher was leading the race and pulled away. Blundell's engine failed on lap 41, spreading oil across the track. Schumacher slid and nearly hit a wall, but did go on to win the race. Between the Monaco and Spanish Grand Prix, David Coulthard was brought in by Williams to replace Ayrton Senna. Nigel Mansell would also be deputising in any races that did not overlap with his IndyCar commitments. Schumacher took pole in Spain and led the pack into lap 2. As he pulled away, he began to have gear selection problems and was stuck in 5th gear. During his stops, he was amazingly able to pull away without stalling the car. Schumacher, who was still in the lead, began to struggle and was eventually passed by Hill, who went on to win the race. The new regulations introduced during the Monaco weekend were now in effect, and another temporary chicane was introduced to slow the cars down. Qualifying in Canada saw Schumacher take pole, and although it began to rain on lap 40, there were no major changes at the top, and Schumacher went on to win the race. In France, the Williams team took a 1-2 in qualifying with Hill on pole. However, at the start of the race, Schumacher showed class as he sliced between the two Williams drivers to take the lead. He eventually went on to win the race. After suspicions were made following Schumacher's impressive launch off the start to win the French Grand Prix, an analysis of the black boxes found a launch control system was in the software, which also included a hidden trigger system. The investigation later exposed that it could be triggered by a PC through an option not visible in the engine management settings known as Option 13. Benetton admitted to the existence of the code but claimed that Schumacher had no way to activate it. The FIA had no way of proving it was being used and therefore took no further action. Hill took pole position in front of his home crowd in Britain. There was controversy when Schumacher passed Hill on the parade lap, which is not permitted under regulations. He then let him resume first position as they went back to the grid to form up. At the start of the race, Hill led Schumacher and the rest of the pack. Hill and Schumacher stayed together, separated by 2 seconds until lap 14, when Schumacher was given a 5-second stop and go penalty for passing Hill on the parade lap. The team told him to ignore this as they were appealing the decision. Schumacher then stayed out beyond the 3-lap limit required to adhere the penalty, and then was shown a black flag, meaning he was then excluded from the race and would have to return to the pits to retire. Benetton, however, continued to negotiate and appeal their decision with race officials. Schumacher would return to the pits on lap 26, but only for his 5-second stop and go penalty. He would then rejoin the race in 3rd place. Hill went on to win the race with Schumacher in 2nd, but the German was disqualified after ignoring the black flag and was banned for 2 races. At the halfway stage of the championship, Schumacher was well ahead of the field with 66 points. Hill was a distant 2nd with 39, and Alesi was 3rd with 19. In the Constructors' Championship, Benetton were comfortably ahead with 67 points, 24 points ahead of Williams with 43, and Ferrari were also right there, just a single point behind them with 42. Benetton had appealed Schumacher's ban and he was able to race whilst the decision was pending. In Germany, the Ferraris locked out the front row of qualifying with Berger taking pole. At the start of the race, there was absolute mayhem when 10 cars were out by the first corner. Surprisingly, the race was not red flagged. When it was time for stops, things took a turn for the worse. Jos Verstappen suffered minor burns on his hands after his Benetton caught fire while refueling. 4 members of the Benetton pit crew also suffered burn-related injuries. The governing authorities of F1 investigated the incident and found that the fuel filter had been removed. This allowed for the valve to catch fire while refueling and also allowed Benetton to fuel their cars 12.5% faster, saving them roughly 1 second per pit stop. Schumacher retired on lap 20 due to engine failure, and with most of the major players out, Berger took an emotional win which he dedicated to his friend Senna. In Hungary, Schumacher took pole and went on to win in a race that saw both the Ferrari engines fail. Controversy surrounded Benetton following the Verstappen pit fire, and they were summoned to appear in front of the World Motorsport Council on the 19th of October 1994 to explain why a filter had been removed from the refueling rig. If found guilty, the team would be excluded from the championship, but they were acquitted. There were track alterations at Belgium due to safety fears, and new boundary lines were painted on the track. Rain in qualifying caused a scrambled grid with Barrichello on pole. However, at the start of the race, Schumacher took the lead on the run up the hill. During the race, Schumacher had a 360 spin and his lead was significantly reduced, but he managed to keep a 5-second gap during the stops. Schumacher took the checkered flag but was later disqualified because the wooden plank at the bottom of his car had experienced excessive wear beyond the 10% margin, and Hill was reclassified as the winner. In more bad news for Schumacher, his ban that was handed down after the British Grand Prix would stand, meaning that he would miss Italy and Portugal. In Italy, the Ferrari fans were sent wild as their drivers achieved a 1-2 in qualifying with Alesi on pole, followed by Berger and then Hill. By lap 29, Hill had managed to take the lead and went on to win the race. With 3/4 of the season gone, Schumacher, who had served 1 race of his 2-race ban, led the championship by 76 points, but Hill, second with 65 points, was just 11 points behind, and Berger was third with 33. In the Constructors' Championship, Benetton led with 85 points, but Williams were hot on their heels with 73. Ferrari were also not too far behind with 58 points. In qualifying, Berger took pole, and at the start of the race he was leading the pack, but he only managed to last until lap 8 when his gearbox failed. After the starts, Coulthard was leading the pack but went wide on lap 33, allowing Hill to take the lead. Hill went on to win the race with Coulthard in second, giving Williams a 1-2 and the lead in the Constructors' Championship. Schumacher was back after his ban and took pole in qualifying. However, at the start of the race, Hill took the lead from Schumacher. During the stops, Hill messed up and the team, afraid that he would lose his lead, sent him out too quickly and without giving him enough fuel. Schumacher, however, was already ahead and Hill had to stop again for fuel. When he rejoined the race, he was over 20 seconds behind and Schumacher went on to win. With just 2 more races to go, there was a major battle for the Drivers' Championship. Schumacher led the championship with 86 points, but Hill was right behind him with 81. Berger was in third with 35. The Constructors' Championship was even closer as Benetton led with 97 points and Williams a mere 2 points behind with 95, and Ferrari were in third with 60. In Japan, Schumacher took pole, and despite the wet track and heavy rain, Schumacher led Hill and the rest of the pack at the start of the race. The race restarted after some time behind a safety car and Schumacher was in the lead on the track and pitted early on lap 19. He took on a set of fresh tyres, but a fuel load that was insufficient to last to the end of the race. He rejoined the track 17 seconds behind Hill on aggregate but got caught in traffic, so this was increased to 30 seconds before it stabilised. This meant that Hill rejoined the race 7 seconds ahead when he pitted on lap 25. However, only 3 of his tyres were changed due to a sticking wheel nut, and, coupled with the heavy fuel load, it meant that Schumacher began to close in. On lap 36, Schumacher took the lead on aggregate but was still behind on the track, and also still needed to pit, which he did on lap 40, putting him 15 seconds behind. Schumacher closed in on Hill at a rate over 1 second per lap, but ran out of time to catch him. Hill won the race by 3.3 seconds and reduced the gap in the Drivers' Championships to 1 point, and the gap in the Constructors' Championship to 5 points. Both championships were going to be decided in Australia and Mansell took pole ahead of Schumacher. At the start of the race, Mansell dropped backwards, leaving the front 2 as Schumacher and Hill. The front 2 pulled away at an astonishing rate from the rest of the field, and during the stops they managed to be separated by just over a second. On lap 35, Schumacher went wide at the East Terrace and brushed the wall. He lost time, but it was unclear whether or not the car had sustained damage. Hill was suddenly right behind him and took this as an opportunity to pass, taking the inside line into the next corner. As Hill's Williams drew alongside the Benetton, Schumacher appeared to turn aggressively and both the rival cars made contact. The Benetton suffered damage to mean an immediate retirement for the German. Hill's car initially appeared undamaged, however it soon became apparent that the front left wishbone was broken. Hill toured slowly back to the pits and after some time trying to repair the damage, he also had to retire his car. Mansell took the checkered flag and picked up his 31st and final career win. Whether this incident was an accident or deliberately caused by Schumacher is still up for much debate today, however it did hand the German his first of 7 World Drivers' Championships as he ended the season on 92 points, pipping Hill to the title by 1 point. The FIA race stewards examined the incident from multiple camera angles and decided against penalising Schumacher. Williams, after having a difficult year with the loss of Senna, chose not to file a protest. Williams won the Constructors' Championship with 118 points, followed by Benetton on 103 and Ferrari on 71. Schumacher maintained that his own turn inside was a normal racing incident and Hill kept quiet on the matter, but his team insisted that Schumacher had hit him on purpose. Quote, "We at Williams were already 100% certain that Michael was guilty of foul play. He was about to drive his stricken Benetton up the slip road when he spotted Damon's Williams about to pass him and abruptly veered across the track to prevent that happening." 1994 was a season that changed Formula One forever. From the rise of Michael Schumacher to the tragic losses of Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger, it redefined the sport and left its mark on history. I hope you found this video informative. It was truly fascinating doing the research for this video and there was so much that I had to cut out due to scripting, and I highly recommend doing your own deep dive if you're interested in learning more because there is so much more to unpack and uncover. If you did like this video, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and also if you have any ideas of F1 content you'd like to see in the future, let me know in the comments down below. And with that out of the way, I hope you have an amazing day.